Hey everyone, today we're going to be taking a look at the Lionel traditional line. For 2024, Lionel introduced their new catalog, and I must say there's some interesting things in it. I kind of flipped through some of this and didn't really develop my thoughts too much about stuff so that I would be reasonably fresh in terms of what I said in the video, but I just wanted to see what was out there so I had some level of idea of what was ahead. And again, this is only covering the traditional section of the catalog because I don't think I ever will be able to afford any of the stuff in the legacy whatever section of the catalog. Maybe I never will, and even if I could technically afford some of that stuff, would I feel justified for spending $200 on a caboose for a toy train? I don't think so. So we're going to take a look at the slightly more down-to-earth priced stuff that the traditional line has, and it's still kind of absurd, so let's take a look at it. So the first thing that caught my eye were these new Genesis locomotives. I like that Lionel introduced these. I think it was a good call because it was sorely needed to have a Lion Chief modern passenger anything, basically. So to see a P42 is kind of a blessing, and I really like it. I think Lionel has done a pretty good job on these models. The ones that they've introduced for this year are the Phase 3 with the black roof, which I really like that. The Phase 1 Heritage unit, which I like that. The Phase 2 with the black roof, that's also pretty cool. The Phase 4, that's Phase 4. I think that looks pretty neat. I like the gray roof. The Metro North locomotives, I like those. I'm not really an East Coast person, but, they're pretty cool. And the Conrail unit, of course, I think a lot of people on the East Coast are going to like that. These units retail for $550 according to Lionel, although dealer prices will probably be a little less. Yeah, I don't know about that. I think, considering it's a locomotive and it seems to be relatively feature-heavy, that's not the worst price you could have, but, especially including our economy right now, Lionel's probably raising their prices just to kind of stay afloat, but man, I'm not going to be buying one of these anytime soon, because I already have a 90s MTH version that cost me less than $100, so yeah, I like used stuff. That's how I go. It may not have the sounds and lights and stuff, but hey, at least I added directional lighting to mine, so at least that's one feature made up. But I'm not saying don't buy these. I'm sure they're probably fine locomotives. It's just a lot of us kind of know when we can't afford something, and we don't even want to try to save up for it. We're just like, you know what, we're gonna put our money somewhere else, and yeah. The Doodle Bugs are a unit that Lionel has really been pushing recently. I think that they're really cool. I think they're kind of an obscure, a slightly more obscure part of railroading that few people kind of realize has been a part of American railroads. And as someone who likes any sort of passenger vehicle on rails, whether it's like an interurban car or an RDC or whatever, this feels like kind of a mix of the two. Like, it's diesel powered, kind of like an RDC, but it has the old styling like a interurban car. I think that this is pretty cool. And I've seen far more Doodle Bugs kind of everywhere on train YouTube after Lionel introduced these, so I think that that's pretty neat. Some of these paint schemes I think are really attractive, but some of them I personally am not the biggest fan of. These do retail for $400 a piece, which, yeah, that's not the worst price for a motorized unit. And I know that they have a whole ton of features, but I don't think you'll catch me buying one of these. Here's the next interesting thing that I kind of came across, and it's the reintroduction of the Prairie type for the starter sets for 027, and it just looks pretty cool. I think I'm a fan of post-war stuff, honestly, in terms of Lionel, maybe more than anything. This is just a really nice locomotive, and of course it's a Pensy locomotive, so a lot of people will like this. And it seems like a decently nice set. Although the price is okay, it's $430, so you could get yourself a Doodlebug, or for $30 more, you could get yourself this train set. So I think in terms of the value you would get out of this, I would say that, yeah, the $430 you'd pay up front is kind of reasonable. But again, they don't really offer much else in terms of low budget stuff, so yeah, we'll move on for now. Another thing that caught my eye was the FT locomotives. And last year they did a few more runs of these, but they have the Pennsylvania and the Brunswick Green. I think that's what it's called. That looks pretty cool. The Union Pacific, I don't know, the computer rendering or whatever looks a little weird, but I'm sure the real ones would probably look really striking. The non-powered dummy units are cool. They belong to some of the sets that Lionel's put out. And yeah, I like the Texas Special especially. I think that that's a really cool set. My least favorite has to be the Lionel lines, though. Not because it's Lionel lines. I think you can do Lionel lines correctly. It's just maybe not like that. I don't know. I think it just kind of sticks out. Again, maybe it's just the computer rendering or whatever, but yeah, I'm not a fan. Although what did catch my eye a little more was the price, $300 per unit, and considering these have decent features, I'm not complaining, but again, a bit much. You know what I really think is too much? It's the dummies. They're $200 a piece. I think even $100 a piece would be a little steep for me, but $200 is just kind of ludicrous. Like, I'm not gonna be paying that much for a dummy. Okay, so here we have what I consider my least favorite part of this catalog so far. And I think what kind of encapsulates a lot of what current day Lionel is all about. So here we have a few passenger cars, a reasonable selection. These are very basic. As someone who owns several sets of these, and they're not exclusive to Lionel either. MTH has made these sets as well. I don't know what the tooling history of these cars is, but I don't know if both the companies have these toolings at the same time, but that is a little bit irrelevant. What matters is these are very bare bones passenger cars in a lot of ways. The only way that you could get more basic than this is the 027 semi-streamlined cars with the silhouettes in the windows, which I like those cars as well, but again, this is almost as low as you could go for the realism or detail level on a passenger car. And they're also semi-scale, so they're not fully scale, and you may be wondering, why am I specifying all this stuff? These are $100 a piece. Not for like a 2-car pack or a 3-car pack or something. A single unit costs $100. And to me that just feels very unfathomable. Like, someone looked at these passenger cars, looked at them in and out, looked at all of the very basic electronics these have, because at the very most they just have lights in them. They looked at that and said, yeah, people will buy these if they're $100, and I'm sure people will. But are people going to like paying $100 for a single passenger car that's not anything special? I don't think that people are going to like that. I definitely wouldn't go out of my way to save up for one of these passenger cars. In fact, I got 3 passenger cars of this type, a Lionel Amtrak Streamliner set, semi-streamliner set, for $50. All 3 cars. They were barely touched by their previous owner. They were just taken out of the box and put on a shelf. And I paid $50 for these pristine passenger cars. But they want 2 times that price for a single unit. I think $100 for a single unit of anything that isn't a locomotive is, or like a locomotive or a dummy, I think $100 for anything that isn't one of those 2 things is kind of crazy to me, especially if it's not anything special. Like I said, these are as basic as you can get when it comes to these passenger cars. But right now, these are very basic, and I know these cars inside out. I've worked on these cars, and they're solid, but they just shouldn't cost this much. Again, I think that this kind of encapsulates a lot of what Lionel's about right now, where they have a decent product. They have a solid product. It runs well, it's going to last for quite a bit, and it's made from decent materials, and it's reasonably well detailed. The craftsmanship is generally good. There are a couple exceptions, but we're not going to get into that. So, like, the product is good, but the pricing is terrible for the consumer, at least. And again, I can tell you, I'm not going to be buying one of these passenger cars for even $50, let alone $100 for a single basic passenger car like this. And again, I'm not just pointing this out for some kind of selfish reason. If someone's wanting to get into the hobby and the only way they know how to buy things is new, then they're going to go to their hobby shop and they're going to see the prices for like a passenger car, like they want to build onto their passenger set or something. They're going to see the prices for an individual passenger car and they're immediately going to either shell out the money for it regretfully and come home with a lackluster product, or they're just not going to buy it. Again, everyone remember there's always the option to buy used, and let me tell you, it is so freeing when you realize that you don't have to buy all your trains new. I hope that Lionel thinks about this for a minute, because I don't know, I'm just giving my perspective as some random hobbyist. I don't know, these basically toys shouldn't cost this much. That's the bottom line. I don't care if it's always been kind of expensive. They're toys and they shouldn't cost this much. They're not super detailed models. They're very basic. That doesn't mean they're bad. I like them. I like them so much I own several, like I've said, but I think we should move on, because these are passenger cars, like just a few units, and I'm getting a little worked up about it, but I just felt like it was a good representative of kind of how Lionel is pricing and making products at the moment. I like these graffiti covered cars. I think that they look pretty neat. I like to kind of customize my own cars in a lot of ways. But if you wanted to buy a stock Lionel thing and you like freight trains with graffiti on them, this is certainly something that you'd probably be interested in. And these cars are also $100 a piece. And that Autorack car looks suspiciously like the Menards one, so considering Menards is selling them for what, like $40 tops, again, less than half the price of this Lionel car. Granted, the Lionel car has slightly better trucks, but beyond that, there's not much of a difference. So now they have a whole Halloween section. This is interesting. I'm going to be honest, I kind of dig these wooden passenger cars with all the ornate details that are kind of Halloween-like. I think they're cool. And you know what? Again, they're priced insanely, but again, they're cool. So, again, this stuff is all kind of typical seasonal stuff, which is odd to see an entire section devoted to Halloween, but I don't know. This is kind of the way Lionel seems to be going, and I don't know if I'm necessarily a fan. Okay, here we are at the Christmas section. This is kind of the real funny part of this. Or kind of, I don't know, some people just hate it when people like me make a big deal about the Christmas stuff, but man, it is kind of hilarious. We'll be honest about this. So they have a Polar Express, and as if we needed another variant of the Polar Express, here's another one. It looks neat. I mean, I wouldn't buy it because I'm not really into Polar Express that much, but yeah, there's probably some people that are gonna go for this stuff. And it's fine if you will, but not for me. And of course, they have a blue one. I mean, you have to get the purple and the blue one. I mean, it would be ludicrous if you didn't. Oh no. Oh no. Oh god, they have the P42. Honestly, the way they did the paint scheme isn't bad. But the fact that I'm complimenting this in the first place kind of doesn't make me feel great. I'm gonna move on. I don't know if I haven't seen a single Polar Express RDC since the last catalog on a video or in person or anything. And I feel like this P42 might be the same way. I might be wrong, but I don't know. This is just kind of funny to me. They have a doodlebug, and like honestly, the doodlebug kind of matches the style of Polar Express a lot more than the P42. We'll move on. Oh no, they had to do this to the Atlantic, didn't they? I don't know. I have a feeling that a couple people are gonna go for this set, and not many people beyond that. I bet. I don't know. I don't know what to say beyond that. It's just kind of there, and it's not for me at all in the slightest. Okay. Continuation of the passenger car rant. This set has an add-on pack of 2 cars, and they want $200 for the 2 cars. So these cars are also $100 a piece, and they are significantly worse than the previous cars. In terms of some ways, I still love these kinds of passenger cars. I have quite a few sets of these, but I can buy a nearly identical car. Maybe it's not in the North Pole Limited, whatever paint scheme. I mean, if I was so inclined, I could paint it in that paint scheme really easily. But I could find one of these passenger cars in box, maybe not even touched, for like $15, $10. And that's not being generous with the discount. I have found several examples of these passenger cars that have been around the $10 mark, and they want $100 for the same thing, pretty much. I don't really know what to say here. I think this does all the talking at this point. But then they have, you know what puzzles me the most? Is they have this set, but it's pulling, the locomotive is an FT, right? So it's like a semi-scale sort of locomotive. Not really 027. But you have 027 cars behind it. And yet we know that you can produce semi-scale cars that look fantastic with the FTs. You've made countless sets that look fantastic that have the FT in these streamlined semi-scale cars, but you just put the 027 ones in there. The only reason why I could think of you doing that is to cheap out on it, because there's significantly more plastic in these 027 cars, and they don't even have interiors. I don't need to say anymore. Oh, so now you have these coaches. Couldn't you have just put these in the set? You know what? I'm not even going to try to argue with Lionel's logic, because it's just obvious that at this point, in terms of the holiday stuff at least, they have no logic. Here's the accessories. We're just going to look at a couple of these. They have a Amtrak Mail and Express station, which is an odd choice, but okay. Appreciate the Amtrak representing. And the Amtrak, the Amshack. That is cool. I like the little Amshack. I think that that's a neat little addition to a layout. Although, again, that's a $50 purchase for a shack, which you could maybe scratch build on your own, and it'd look pretty good for barely any of that price. More than anything, I'm at a little bit of a loss for words, or maybe I have too much in my head about this catalog. I don't know, like, it's not necessarily about the stuff in this catalog, it's just about the overall problems with Lionel as a company, or as a manufacturer from the consumer's perspective, and the problems with the hobby as a whole in some ways. And yeah, I think a lot of people would immediately invalidate my perspective, because I'm just a teen who is kind of into the model railroad hobby, or toy train hobby, again, whatever you want to call it. And I'm not in the industry, I never have been, and I probably never will be. But I do think that a lot of people agree with some of the sentiments I shared in this video, especially in terms of price. And there are a lot of people who really don't like it when you point out, hey, this thing is kind of ludicrously expensive. And you know, one thing that I've noticed across the board with the people who get mad at you for pointing out a exuberant price, those people are the people who can afford that. Of course they're not complaining, because they can afford it. And it doesn't really seem ludicrous to them, but I think to everyone else, yeah. Hell, even if you're reasonably well off, some of this stuff is just kind of insane to spend money on. I don't think you should be upper middle class and up to have a hobby. And it's just generally frustrating to me, not just me as a person, but I think to a lot of people in this hobby, that it's just become inaccessible in a lot of ways. And a lot of people, again, the same people who can afford modern stuff and don't really complain about it, always love to bring up the point of, yeah, well, it's always been expensive. And yeah, in some cases that might be true. But overall, they used to offer cheap products at cheap prices, or reasonably cheap prices. Cheaper than things today. And again, in this economy, prices of goods are going up, and people's pay isn't necessarily going up too. Again, I do think that there is sort of a split in the hobby between those who are complacent with how things are in terms of pricing, and then those who are frustrated with how things are in terms of pricing. Again, both viewpoints have some valid ideas, but overall I think things are too expensive in my opinion. Some may say, it is what it is when it comes to price. If we want this hobby to have a bright future, I think we need to at least let people know that they can buy used stuff. And on that note, I think I'm going to leave it there. This was kind of a crazy video. It was a little more negative than I wanted it to be. I thought that this catalog was going to be really, really pretty cool from what I've heard, but it's okay. There's some neat stuff in there again, but yeah, I'm going to leave it there and let you guys talk about it. Leave a comment. Tell me what you think. If you agree that Lionel is charging a little too much for their stuff, go ahead. If you don't, sure, let me hear. I'd love to hear a more well-rounded perspective of stuff in the hobby. Alright, so hopefully regular content will kind of resume eventually, but for now, that's it. So thanks for watching and have a great day.